All right, welcome back to NUIC Football Fanatics. We're here to bring you our Week 3 matchups and predictions. Had a lot of action last week in Week 2. Some scores that were a little bit surprising. What was the most surprising score that you thought happened last week, Shane?
Well, the most surprising score would have been Dakota and Amboy, but the game altogether would definitely have been the Galena Forreston game. A lot of us thought that would be a little closer. We knew Galena wasn't quite up to what we thought they'd be. Forreston, we didn't know after their week 1 against AFC. We've obviously ranked Forreston high all year, but we thought that game would be a little closer.
Yeah, I think that the Forreston Galena game is definitely the tops. I was not expecting a running clock in that game. I don't think many people were expecting a running clock in that game. The one thing I did see was Galena did not stop fighting, which was very good. But Forreston, man, holy cow, they get on the board in a hurry too.
Right. And like you said, we weren't expecting a running clock, and looking at the updates, and it's like holy cow, Forreston's up 20-0, 35, and next thing you know, the clock's running, and people are heading for the exits after the opening kickoff of the third quarter. So things happen in a hurry. Forreston's definitely a team that can put some points on the board in a hurry.
Oh yeah, and that Dakota Amboy game, I thought that would be closer than it was. You got Dakota jumping out with 18 unanswered points. Amboy comes back with 20 unanswered points.
Right.
And then Dakota follows that up with another 20 unanswered points. Kind of like Dakota comes out on fire, has a blip, Amboy comes back, and then Dakota takes off again.
Right. And, we didn't have coverage there, but we talked to people who were there, and they said that, Dakota might have had a few defensive miscues, and, they gave up a score with 12 seconds to go before half. Going forward, we'll talk about it a little more in depth when we do our game breakdown, but that's something that Dakota's going to have to really get under ropes here.
Yep. All right, this brings us to our first matchup of the week. We have West Carroll, who is 0-2, losing last week to EPC 32-14, traveling down to Amboy, who was a 38-20 loser to Dakota. What are your keys for this game here, Shane?
Well, West Carroll definitely needs to get in the win column and in a hurry. The schedule isn't looking too great moving forward. I think if they play their ball game, they can do well against Amboy. The last 2 weeks, West Carroll's really shot themselves in the foot. They were able to move the ball up the middle on Dakota, which surprised a few people. And then they come out last week against EPC and start throwing. That, to me, that might have been a problem on the scouting department, so to speak. After watching film, that Lena was able to throw those 2 big passes against EPC, and they thought that they might be able to exploit things when maybe West Carroll probably should have kept the ball on the ground a little more.
That's a great point, actually. I did not realize that West Carroll was trying to open up with the pass game there. They definitely have a ways to go. A loss this week would drop them to 0-3 on the year. That would make it most likely for them not to make the playoffs, because you're looking at them being possibly 1-4 after week 5, as they still have a matchup with Forreston in week 5. And they're going to need at least 4 more wins against games with East Dubuque, Galena, and Lena.
Doesn't look good.
No.
But I think that, a win against Amboy would go a long way in helping them get back on track. This is a team that we talked about, you break down these 7 possible teams that could win the conference, and West Carroll we thought would be right up there with them, and so far it hasn't gotten there.
Yeah. As far as Amboy, they need to come back with a big rebound after the loss to Dakota. That game really answered some questions as far as what Amboy is. We've kind of been talking about it. They've mostly a pretty dominant run team, mainly only, and a loss in this game would drop them to 1-2 with a week 4 matchup with Forreston. They would need at least 4 wins in their next 5 weeks too, in which they're facing off against East Dubuque, Lena, EPC, and Aquin.
Doesn't look good again, but I think Amboy can exploit some holes that West Carroll has, but not necessarily on the offense. Amboy's offense did good things on Friday, but their biggest problem is that they gave up close to 400 yards on the ground against Dakota. I mean, you can't have that. Granted, Andrew Winger is a good ball carrier, but West Carroll isn't going to have the running attack that Dakota has. It should work out for Amboy to stop them a little bit better.
Yeah, I see Amboy coming in, that defense flying to the ball, being able to shut West Carroll down. They're going to give up some points. I don't see this as a blowout game either way it goes, but I do see Amboy as the favorite in this game.
I would agree, and I have it maybe a score or two, nothing too big.
Yeah, I think the same thing there. Score 2 there as well. Our next game takes us to East Dubuque, where they'll be hosting Galena. Galena comes in at 0-2 after a loss last week to Forreston 41-13, and East Dubuque comes in at 2-0 with a 34-14 win over Orangeville. This has got a lot of intentions of a good game here. What do you think, Shane?
Well, like we talked a little bit on the introduction, Galena is down a little bit this year, and I think that East Dubuque can give them a game. As far as East Dubuque goes, they got to keep the mojo going. Keep what's working. They played a good game against Peck, and I'd say they played a half a good game against Orangeville. The first half is probably one that they want to forget about, but at the end of the game, they ended up out on top. Looking as far as East Dubuque's concerned, this is a chance for them to go 3-0, which not many people, myself included, ever thought they'd get to. But if they can get to 3 wins, the schedule doesn't look very favorable for East Dubuque, but you only play one game at a time, so keep adding the victories and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, talking about that schedule, their road definitely gets a lot tougher starting this week. You take out Galena, go to 3-0, you still have Dakota, Amboy, Forreston, West Carroll, Lewin, and EPC remaining. That's a lot to get through if they win this week to get another 2 wins, maybe even a 6th win for guaranteed playoff positioning.
And that's, we don't know for sure how all these teams are going to be. Every team's at this class is always an injury away. You don't know how things are going to go. But it's definitely not in East Dubuque's favor going forward. But I think that a win here, you never know what can happen, and you'd always like to beat Galena.
Yeah, and you got a big rivalry game there.
Right.
They're only, 12 miles apart from each other. East Dubuque going 3-0 is going to be huge for them to reach their goals. I know their goal is to get back into the playoffs after missing the last couple of years. They want to get back to that Warrior football that has risen over the past decade. But for Galena, on the other hand, a loss in this game spells disaster. And quite frankly, in my opinion, Galena loses this game, falls to 0-3.
They're done.
You can kiss the playoffs goodbye. And that'd be only the 4th time in the last 32 seasons that they would miss the playoffs.
Right. Because I think Galena is definitely going to have to get to 6 wins with crossover Warren. Warren and Galena are kind of in the same boat. They both should be rooting for each other to win every week that they're not playing each other, because those points might come in handy. Galena's still got Dakota, Galena, EPC left after this, so it doesn't look good for Galena either.
Yeah, both teams have big schedules. Playoff aspirations definitely rest on the line in this game, even for East Dubuque, who right now looks like they're sitting good at 2-0, but they haven't hit the hard part of their schedule yet.
They basically won the games that you're supposed to this point. That's all you can ask.
Right, exactly. I think Galena will be the favorite in this game, but I think East Dubuque's going to come in and get a win at home here.
I would agree 100%. I'm taking East Dubuque.
Excellent. All right, our third game takes us over to Pearl City, where Pecatonica comes into town to take on the EPC Wildcats. Pecatonica comes in a game at 0-2 with a 42-0 loss last week at Lena Winslow, and EPC comes in at 2-0 with their 32-14 win over West Carroll last week. What'd you think about that game, Shane?
Well, a few things were a little surprising. We thought West Carroll would play with EPC better. Some people even predicted West Carroll to win, but the opening kickoff went to the house for EPC, and suddenly West Carroll was in a hold trying to find their way out. And there was other mistakes that West Carroll made, fumbles, you name it, just things you can't do against a quality opponent.
Yeah, definitely. Turnovers are a key in any game. When you make turnovers against an inferior team, you can make up for it, but when you're playing a team that is of the same quality of you, turnovers are going to kill you every time.
Every time.
And you can't do that. Looking at this game, EPC is looking to go 3-0 for the first time since 2014. This would also give them a 4-game winning streak dating back to week 9 of last year. I feel that they're going to need this win in this game, because you look ahead at their schedule and they got Polo, Dakota, Amboy, and Forreston still lurking off in the distance.
Definitely not an easy schedule coming up, but I think EPC will be motivated. There's still some kids that are probably thinking they should have beat Pecatonica last year. They went to Peck. I think the score was 20-0 or something, but, Pecatonica really took it to them last year. So, I look for some extra motivation coming from EPC for this game especially.
Yeah, I see EPC is looking to prove their doubters wrong. You had a lot of people, papers, ourselves included, that had predicted EPC to go 2-7 or 3-6. They're out to prove that they're back in that conference race this year, a year earlier than people expected them to be.
And I would agree with that. We predicted them at 2-7, 3-6, even 4-5. Granted, I believe EPC is going to find 5 wins somewhere on the schedule, but there's still a case to be made. If someone said EPC could go in 3-6, you could look at the schedule and say, yeah, that could be possible.
Yeah, I agree, though. I think EPC is getting to that 5-win, even 6-win mark. Looking ahead, 5 wins would get them in, most likely, because right now, the way I see it, they're going to have over 40 playoff points, which the average cutoff has been at 38 points. Granted, it's still too early to tell where that playoff picture is going to lie.
Right. And, I just think that EPC will come out, extra hard for this game. My point for Peck would be to just remain competitive. You played Lena tough last week, whether that was Lena being down again after their loss to EPC, or Peck did some great things, but I like EPC in this game.
I like EPC too. Peck has the toughest schedule of any team in the NUIC this year, especially having a crossover with the upstate favorite in Stockton. Things aren't going to get any easier for the next 7 weeks for Pecatonica. You look at those last 7 games, 5 of them were playoff teams last year. You got 2 more that could make the playoffs this year, knocking out 2 others from last year's playoff picture.
Right, and like we said, it just doesn't get very easy for Peck. A lot of us thought that East Dubuque game might be their chance to get a win on this season, and now East Dubuque's proven us wrong. So, like I said, though, I like EPC. I don't know, a few scores.
Yeah, I see EPC winning this one, probably by at least 4 to 5 scores.
Right.
All right, we're moving over to the Upstate Conference where we have AFC going to Milledgeville. AFC comes in this game at 1-1 with a 14-12 win over Warren, and Milledgeville comes in as also 1-1 with a 14-12 loss to Aquin. Those were some interesting games there last week, both those two.
Yeah. What really surprised me the most was Milledgeville and Aquin. Not necessarily the score, but you look at the score and you think it's just a great game, but from what I understood, it wasn't a very well played game. Milledgeville made some mistakes, as did Aquin. Milledgeville probably feels like they should have came away with the victory. Both teams are sitting at 1-1. They both need a victory really bad.
Yeah. AFC definitely needs to win. If they win this game here against Milledgeville, it will almost but guarantee them a playoff spot with 3 games coming up that they should be heavily favored in.
Right.
Their crossover is with Forreston, so they're going to get the utmost of playoff points there as well.
Right.
So they're going to be pretty much assured a playoff spot with 5 wins.
Right. And, the same could be said for Milledgeville with their crossover being Dakota. You're looking at 7, 8. Maybe 9 points. You don't know what's going to happen. But, I like the winner of this game making the playoffs for sure.
Well, and going with Milledgeville there, you got to look. Milledgeville needs this game to win, but they also need to be at 4-1 coming out of week 5 in order to have that chance for win number 5.
Yep.
Because then you have Stockton, Polo, Dakota, and then you finish up week 9 with Milledgeville.
Yeah, it doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, so week 5, Warren definitely needs to come in at 4-1, and then they need to look for an upset or definitely win week 9 against Milledgeville, which that may not even be easy looking at some of these scores that these teams have piled up here the last 2 weeks.
Right, there's a lot of wild cards, and I think we're going to get into some more surprises as the season progresses. But as far as this game is concerned, Milledgeville's at home, and I like them at home.
Yeah, I like Milledgeville at home in this game too. I think the Missiles are going to come out. I think they're going to win this one by a score.
I would agree with that. 1 score.
All right, our next game brings us to the Battle of the Bulldogs as Aquin goes to Durand. Aquin comes in this game at 2-0 with a 14-12 win over Milledgeville last week. And Durand comes in at 0-2 with a 45-6 loss to Polo. In this game, I really feel that Aquin needs to stay focused and get to that third win. This will most likely allow him to get to that fifth win in order to make the playoffs. What do you think here, Shane?
Yeah, I think Aquin can really build on some things in this game. Maybe go back, figure out what they didn't do so well against Milledgeville, even though they got the victory. Work on some things. Unfortunately, if you're a Durand Bulldog fan, that doesn't bode well for you. Durand's one of those teams that we talked about to begin with. Doesn't have many numbers, and every week they're going to find themselves in a battle for a victory. Not much is going to change in this week, unfortunately. But for Aquin, we said finding 5 wins. You got Polo to play yet. You still have Stockton. Those are going to be 2 hard games.
Don't forget Amboy.
Amboy as well as their crossover in week 9. But you got Orangeville, River Ridge, AFC. Those are 3 games that you want to put in your win column, but you play the games.
Yeah, and really for Aquin, a loss here against Durand is going to make next week's game against AFC a definite must-win in order to make those playoffs. As far as Durand, we knew they were going to be down. Maybe they thought they were going to be down, but really they just need to take it a game at a time. They need to focus on not making mistakes. If they do that, maybe they can start being a spoiler for some of these teams. Maybe they can get some surprise wins that people aren't expecting them to get. I just don't see it this week. I feel that Aquin wins big. All right, our next game takes us up to Warren, where Orangeville comes to town. Orangeville comes in at 0-2 with a 34-14 loss to East Dubuque last week. And Warren comes in at 0-2 as well with a 14-12 loss to AFC. What do you think about this matchup here, Shane?
Well, for Orangeville, I think they need to come out like they did the first half against East Dubuque. East Dubuque made some mistakes to make that game close, but Orangeville also did some nice things. I think that if Orangeville comes out for 4 quarters like that, it might be a close game, but I think Warren will be able to move the ball against Orangeville's line. Warren, based on our projections, Warren's going to miss the playoffs at 5-4. You got to get a win here. You got to get something going, something to build on.
Yeah, as far as Orangeville, like you said, I have the exact same thing. East Dubuque, the way they came out and played East Dubuque for that first half, Orangeville needs to come into this game and do the exact same thing. As far as Warren, you're absolutely right. Warren has pretty much closed their playoff opportunities. Obviously, it's only week 3 that we're going into. They still have that opportunity to make the playoffs, so sell down Warrior fans. But it's going to be very hard. You got matchups with Milledgeville in week 9. You still have to play Stockton, Polo, and Galena as well. It's going to be a very slim chance for them to make playoffs.
Right, and you look at the schedule, you got Durand and Milledgeville. If you're a Warren fan, you're hoping that you can put those 2 in the win column, but the way Milledgeville's playing, that's not a gimme. And then you look at, Polo, Stockton, and Galena. You're going to need to steal one of those. Your best bet's probably going to be Galena, but that's the end of the year, and you don't know. The Pirates might be playing good football by then.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. Warren, 5 wins may not get them in. I think Warren needs to look for 6 wins. They're going to have to look for an upset there in Polo, Stockton, or Galena in order to make the playoffs.
And I just don't see that happening. But as far as this game's concerned, I like Warren at home. I just don't think Orangeville has what it takes to get it done this week.
I agree. I think Warren breaks into the win column here. Orangeville will be playing better. They need to come prepared. But Warren's definitely going to be my favorite in this one. This brings us to our crossover game where River Ridge travels to Lena to take on the Lena Winslow Panthers. River Ridge comes in at 0-2 with a 38-0 loss last week to Stockton, and Lena Winslow comes in at 1-1 with a 42-0 win over Pecatonica. I feel that Lena needs to get this win this week. It'll be their 2nd win of the season. As if you look at their next 4 games, they got Galena, Dakota, Amboy, and Forreston.
It's going to be tough, but as far as this game's concerned, I think this is another week, just like last week against Pecatonica, although that didn't prove to be true. This was a game that could be beneficial to Lena on working on some things. We said that about Pecatonica. At the end of the first quarter, I only believe it was 8-0. Lena didn't set the world on fire. They need to come out ready because River Ridge did play Stockton and Polo, both close for a while. I mean, that wasn't your traditional games of what we've been seeing from River Ridge. You know, Polo beat them by, what was it, 3 scores, I believe, or 3 or 4 scores.
Yep.
And, you know, people are like, oh, is it Polo or is it River Ridge? Well, you know, I think River Ridge is vastly improved. Lena can't overlook them, but I do like Lena in this. As you said, Lena's schedule definitely picks up here in the next few weeks. But I like Lena in this game. You know, River Ridge plays tough, but I think Lena's going to be able to move the ball.
Yeah, I mean, River Ridge has not scored a point yet, but they haven't been running clocked yet either, which last year, especially against Polo and Stockton, that's exactly the case that happened.
Right, and those are your, you know, as of this point, those are probably your 2 top teams on the upstate division. So,
right.
It wouldn't surprise me if River Ridge was able to get a win or 2 here or there.
Yeah, I definitely see River Ridge coming in with a win somewhere in the season. I really do. Right. They're much improved. They're playing these top-tier teams pretty well, but it's not going to happen this week. Lee Wynn's going to come in typical Lee Wynn fashion, and they're going to dominate this game at home.
And I like Lena Winslow getting the 2-1.
Yes, I do too. This brings us to our upstate game of the week, where we have the Stockton Blackhawks traveling down to Polo to take on the Marcos. Both teams come in with undefeated records at 2-0. Stockton won last week over River Ridge 38-0, while Polo beat Durand 45-6. What do you think about this game here, Shane? You got the Blackhawks coming in, ranked number 10 in the state. Polo's receiving some votes here, not too far behind them.
You know, this is one of those matchups, and we'll get into our next one here after this, but, you know, this is one of those games where you look at the winner and you think, okay, they can win the conference, their division of the conference, you know. For me, it's all about ball control and line play. For Polo, I think the Polo needs to slow the ball down a little bit. I think they'll have a little room to run, but they definitely need to control the clock. You know, Polo's best bet is going to keep Stockton's offense off the field. But I think Polo will fare okay as far as this game goes. But Stockton, you know, they're going to want to move the ball through the air too. I think that they will have opportunity to do that, as well as a good running game for this.
Well, and you look at Stockton. Stockton runs that spread offense, but they like to run out of the spread,
right,
not just throw the ball. And, you know, they can throw the ball downfield with Fox, but they like to throw a lot of screen passes too, to get their running backs involved. But then they like to run the ball as well. So they're very multi-dimensional offensively. As far as Polo, they're looking to come in to prove that they're still a threat in the conference.
Right. Basically to shut us up because, you know, the last 2 weeks we've said, well, is Polo what they were last year? Well, we both can say, no, they're not what they were last year, but are they close?
Yeah, and Polo's got a lot of shoes to fill off of last year's team. Right. This isn't last year's quarterfinals team that just ran roughshod through everybody until they met up with Stark County. But this is a huge statement game for Polo saying, hey, guys, we're still here.
Right.
Are the Marcos for real this year? I don't know. But that question is going to be answered in this game.
Right, and like you said off camera, the junior class for Polo hasn't lost a game all through the ranks. You know, they got something to prove. You know, I'm sure a lot of people are going to take Polo and a lot of people are going to take Stockton. You know, a lot of people look at this as a toss-up. I myself like Stockton, but I can definitely see where you can make a case for Polo.
Yeah, you look at the Blackhawks. They're coming in confident. They're ranked number 10 in the state. The last 2 years, Polo's had their number. The reason being is because Stockton defensively has not played physically enough to stop the run game. I feel that's changed this year. I think Stockton is more physical this year, and I think they're geared to stop that run. And you put that dangerous offense on the field against a defense that's not afraid to hit. You got a potent combination right there.
Right.
I agree with you, though. I'm going to go with Stockton in this game. I think this is going to be a dogfight-able game, though.
Right.
But I feel Stockton's going to get this by 2 scores.
And I agree. I have Stockton listed at a plus 14 right here. I just think there'll be a little bit too much for Polo to handle at this point.
Yep, I agree with that. This brings us to our Northwest game of the week, where we got a state-ranked showdown between the Forreston Cardinals traveling to the Dakota Indians. Forreston comes into the game ranked as the number 4 state-ranked team, while Dakota comes in at number 5. Forreston comes in at 2-0 with a 41-13 win over Galena last week. And Dakota also comes in at 2-0 with a 38-20 win over Amboy last week. What are some keys here for either of these teams to start off this game with, Shane?
Well, for my perspective, Forreston is going to want to get to the outside so they can run. You know, it's nothing that nobody doesn't know. Forreston is hands down the fastest team in the conference.
Oh, by far.
They get to the outside, they're gone.
Yeah.
Dakota's got a heck of a defense, but it doesn't matter. You know, Forreston is going to want to run off tackle. You're not going to want to go up the middle much. As far as Dakota's version, you're going to want to contain the edges. You're going to want to force them up the middle. I think you're even going to want to move winger inside and outside, move them around a lot. Give Forreston different looks. You know, Forreston doesn't pass the ball really well, or much for that matter. You're going to want to make Forreston throw the ball. Forreston's not going to want to throw the ball. You know, this is a seesaw battle back and forth. Basically a defensive battle, although there's plenty of offensive weapons on both teams.
Well, as far as Forreston throwing the ball, I definitely feel that you need to force Forreston to throw the ball.
Right.
As far as them not being able to throw the ball, I'm not 100% sure on that. I mean, their quarterback is a returner from last year in Hunter Dawes. But last week he only threw 2 passes in the entire game. He was 1 for 2. The week before, I'm not exactly sure how many passes he threw. I doubt it was very many in their win against AFC.
But both games were blowouts, so, you know, they might pass more because they might be forced in order to move the ball to pass.
Well, and you look at their game against Galena last week. I mean, you had Christensen with 6 carries for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. You had Fox with 6 carries for 158 yards and a touchdown. Hell, your fullback, Matt Akins, only had 4 carries for 38 yards. You look at 4 carries, 38 yards, that's a good clip.
Right.
But that's all he needed to do, because even Hunter Dawes had a 44-yard touchdown run there last week. They just scored so fast, so quick last week that they didn't even use their offense in the second half.
And that's got to be a concern for Dakota. You know, I think that, you know, like other games we've mentioned, Dakota, you know, you want to slow Forreston down, you know, long, sustained drives. If they take 20 plays to go 80 yards and 7 minutes off the clock to score, then so be it. But you'd rather have that than the quick scores and getting the ball back.
Yeah, and I think Forreston needs to come in this game and prove that they're not one-dimensional. Because right now it looks like they are, in my personal opinion. But they're very good at that one dimension because they have multiple options with their 3 different running backs that they have, and they couldn't even throw in a 4th running back. I mean, last week, before they got to the running clock situation, they had 5 or 6 different guys run the football.
Right.
So they have many different options. Dakota definitely needs to come in. They need to contain that outside run. They need to force everything to the inside. If they can force everything to the inside, Dakota will be all right.
I believe that as well.
The minute they let something get outside, they're going to be in trouble, and they cannot allow that outside to get out there. They need to stay home and force everything to the middle in order to win this game. They also need to be multi-dimensional on defense, or on offense, I mean, because Forreston being fast on offense, they're just as fast on defense. But I feel that Dakota can come in, and if they can be multi-dimensional, attack across the middle on Forreston, they're going to see some success.
Right, and that's something that Forreston's going to have to watch out. You know, you got Andrew Winger already rushing for over 500 yards. You know, they're going to be keyed on him, You're going to need big games from Holstein, you know, as supporting staff. Winger's not going to be able to carry the whole load in this game.
Well, that's just it. You said Winger's got, 509 yards already? They're going to be keying on him.
Right.
You got to have more options than just Andrew Winger.
Exactly.
And that's what Forreston has. You have Akins, Christensen, Fox, Dawes. You've got so many different options there.
Right.
Dakota's got to do the same thing.
And they were able to open up the pass game a little bit against Amboy last week, so, you know, that's something that they're going to want to keep progressing on, not even just for this game, you know, as the season progresses.
I see this game either being a runaway by Forreston, or it's going to be a close game.
Right.
And I think in a close game, Dakota wins.
Right. But I'm going to take Forreston by a score.
I take Forreston by a score in this game, too. So that brings us to our coverage areas for this week. Where are you going this week, Shane?
I will be back at Dakota to watch 2 state-ranked teams. Forreston come to town and play Dakota.
That's a great game to watch. I wish we could be there, but we owe it to you guys to cover both games of the weeks. So Kerry and myself will be going to Polo to to watch the Stockton at Polo game. we feel that both these games are definitely big games of the weeks. Both could be definitely considered game of the years in each respective division as well.
Like we talked about, I personally see both winners taking on both division titles.
Right. So we hope to see you out there Friday night. If you do see us, feel free to stop by and say hi. And as always, we hope you root for the NUIC.